Eleanor's hands trembled as she clutched the eviction notice, the cruel words blurring through her tears as the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across her small homestead. 3 years a widow, 2 months behind on rent, and now homeless, all because Thomas Parker, the banker who'd once courted her before her first marriage, couldn't stomach her barrenness and had found a younger, more promising bride. Faith Jenkins folded the paper and tucked it into her apron pocket, willing her trembling to stop. Durango, Colorado in 1878 was no place for a woman alone, especially one with her particular history. Her first husband, Elijah, had made sure everyone in 3 counties knew about her failure as a woman before he died of pneumonia, leaving her nothing but debts and whispers that followed her everywhere. She had until sundown tomorrow to vacate the tiny house she'd somehow kept going since Elijah's death. Faith gazed at the meager garden she'd planted, the single milk cow she'd saved for months to buy, and felt the crushing weight of despair settling on her shoulders. Mrs. Jenkins. Faith whirled around to find a tall man on horseback regarding her with curious eyes. She quickly wiped her face with her sleeve. "Yes, that's me, Samuel Erikson." He tipped his hat, revealing sandy brown hair and a weathered face that spoke of long days under the sun. "I heard Parker's putting you out." Faith stiffened. "News travels fast, small town." He dismounted with the easy grace of a man who'd spent his life in the saddle. "I've got a proposition for you if you'll hear it." Faith crossed her arms defensively. She'd heard propositions before. Most weren't fit for decent conversation. "I'm listening, Mr. Erikson, but I'd advise you to keep it proper." Something like amusement flickered in his blue eyes. "Nothing improper about a business arrangement, madam. I've got 4 boys at home, aged 6 to 12. Their mother passed 3 years back, and I've been trying to run my ranch and raise them proper. It's not working out so well." Faith remained silent, waiting for him to continue. "I need a wife, Mrs. Jenkins, someone to help with the boys, keep house, and be a mother to them. They're good boys, but they need a woman's guidance." His eyes met hers directly. "I know about your situation. I know you've been treated poorly. I'm offering you a home, protection, and my name. In return, you help me with my sons." Faith felt her heart hammering in her chest. "You're proposing marriage to a stranger, to a woman known for her hard work and kindness despite what's been done to her." He looked uncomfortable but pushed forward. "It wouldn't have to be, that is, I don't expect." "A real marriage," Faith finished for him, her cheeks heating. "Not unless you wanted it to be in time." Samuel cleared his throat. "My ranch is 15 miles west, 2-story house, good land, running water. The boys need schooling and someone who can cook something besides beans and bacon." Faith stared at him, trying to process this sudden turn. "Why me?" "Plenty of women would jump at the chance to marry a rancher with property." "I've had offers," he admitted, "but they want a husband, not 4 rowdy boys, and I've seen how you are with the children after Sunday service. Patient, kind." He paused. "The boys and I will be back at sunup tomorrow. If you want to accept, have your things ready. If not, no hard feelings." Before Faith could respond, he was back on his horse. "Think it over, Mrs. Jenkins. It's an honest offer." As Samuel Erikson rode away, Faith stood frozen, the eviction notice heavy in her pocket and his proposal even heavier on her mind. Dawn broke with Faith standing on her porch, 2 trunks packed with every possession she could salvage. She'd spent the night in prayer and deliberation, weighing certain homelessness against marriage to a stranger with 4 children. When Samuel arrived with a wagon and 4 curious boys peering from the back, Faith had made her decision. "Mrs. Jenkins," Samuel nodded in greeting, taking in her packed belongings. "I see you've considered my offer." "I have conditions, Mr. Erikson," Faith said firmly, ignoring the butterflies in her stomach. "I'm listening. I'll be a mother to your boys, keep your house, and bear your name. But I won't be treated as property or servant. I expect respect from you and your sons." Samuel nodded solemnly. "That's fair." And Faith hesitated. "If this arrangement proves unsuitable for either of us after 6 months, I want your word you'll help me establish myself elsewhere." The oldest boy, a lanky child with his father's blue eyes, whispered something to his brother. Samuel silenced him with a look before turning back to Faith. "You have my word, Mrs. Jenkins, though I hope it won't come to that." He gestured to the wagon. "Shall we make it official before we leave town? Pastor Miller opens the church at 8. 2 hours later, Faith Jenkins became Faith Erikson in a brief ceremony witnessed by the pastor's wife and Samuel's 4 solemn-faced sons. The boys William, George, Thomas, and Joseph regarded their new stepmother, with expressions ranging from curiosity to open suspicion. The journey to the Erikson ranch was largely silent, broken only by the occasional question from 6-year-old Joseph about her cooking abilities and whether she knew any stories. Faith's first glimpse of her new home took her breath away. The 2-story farmhouse sat nestled against a backdrop of mountains, with a large barn and several outbuildings spreading across well-maintained land. A creek cut through the property and horses grazed in a fenced pasture. "It's beautiful," she whispered, almost to herself. "It needs work," Samuel replied, "but it's home." The inside of the house told a different story. While structurally sound, it showed clear evidence of 3 years without a woman's touch. Clothes were scattered throughout, dishes piled in the sink, and dust covered every surface. Faith tried to hide her dismay, but Samuel caught her expression. "I warned you it wasn't pretty," he said. "The boys and I do what we can, but—" "I'll manage," Faith assured him, already mentally organizing the work ahead. "Boys, can you help bring in my trunks?" The first week passed in a blur of cleaning, organizing, and establishing boundaries with her new stepsons. William, the oldest at 12, maintained a cool distance, clearly remembering his mother and resenting Faith's presence. 10-year-old George followed his brother's lead, but occasionally forgot himself enough to smile at Faith's jokes. Thomas, 8, was more openly curious, asking endless questions about her life before. And little Joseph attached himself to her almost immediately, starved for maternal affection. Samuel remained polite but distant, leaving early for work with the cattle and returning late, taking his meals quickly before retreating to the small office off the kitchen where he kept the ranch accounts. He had given Faith his wife's old room and taken a smaller one down the hall, making it clear he intended to honor his promise about the nature of their marriage. On the 10th night, Faith finally confronted him as he prepared to disappear after dinner. "Mr. Erikson, Samuel, we need to talk about the boys' education." He looked up, surprised. "They learn what they need from me. Reading cattle brands and counting fence posts isn't a proper education," Faith countered. "William can barely read and George's numbers are all backward." Samuel frowned. "The school in town is too far. I was a teacher before I married Elijah," Faith interrupted. "I can teach them here, but I'll need supplies and your support." Samuel studied her for a long moment. "You never mentioned you were a teacher." "You never asked anything about me beyond whether I could cook and clean," Faith pointed out, then immediately regretted her sharp tone. "I'm sorry, that wasn't fair." To her surprise, Samuel chuckled. "No, you're right. I've been so focused on what you could do for us, I never thought about who you were before." He looked genuinely remorseful. "That was wrong of me." The ice between them cracked slightly that night as Samuel asked about her teaching days and her life before Elijah. Faith found herself talking more than she had in years, describing her childhood in Missouri and her brief, happy time teaching in a small schoolhouse before meeting Elijah Jenkins. "He wasn't always cruel," Faith explained, surprising herself with her candor. "The first year was good. But when I didn't conceive, he changed. The disappointment ate at him until there was nothing left but bitterness." Samuel's expression darkened. "No man has the right to treat his wife that way. The world judges women harshly for such failings," Faith said quietly. "It wasn't your failing," Samuel replied firmly. "And it's not something I expect from our arrangement." The conversation shifted something between them. Samuel began returning earlier from his work, sometimes helping Faith with her makeshift school lessons for the boys. He listened to her ideas about improvements for the house and implemented many of them. Slowly, a tentative friendship formed. The boys, too, began to thaw. William remained the most resistant, but even he begrudgingly admitted Faith's stew was better than Pa's burned offerings. George discovered Faith new exciting tales of river pirates from her Mississippi childhood. Thomas appreciated her patience in teaching him to write his name properly. And Joseph simply adored his new mother, following her everywhere like a devoted puppy. One evening in late October, nearly 3 months into their marriage, Faith was hanging laundry when she heard shouting from the barn. She rushed over to find William holding a bleeding arm, his face pale with shock. What happened? She demanded, already tearing a strip from her petticoat for a bandage. Caught it on a nail, William mumbled. It's nothing. This isn't nothing, Faith countered, examining the deep gash. This needs stitches. She looked at George, who stood nearby. Run and get your father from the north pasture. Tell him to hurry. As George raced off, Faith led William to the house, trying to stay calm despite the alarming amount of blood. Keep pressure on it, she instructed, gathering needle, thread, and the precious bottle of whiskey she kept for medicinal purposes. By the time Samuel burst through the door, Faith had cleaned the wound and prepared to stitch it. What happened? Samuel demanded, his face white with fear. A bad cut, but he'll be fine if we can close it properly, Faith assured him. I need you to hold him still. This will hurt, William. The boy tried to be brave, but tears streamed down his face as Faith carefully stitched the wound closed. Throughout the ordeal, Samuel murmured encouragement to his son while watching Faith with new respect in his eyes. That night, after the boys were asleep, Samuel found Faith scrubbing William's blood from the kitchen floor. You were amazing today, he said quietly. Faith looked up, exhausted. Any mother would do the same, but you're not. Samuel stopped himself. What I mean is, you didn't have to care that much. This arrangement, those boys are my responsibility now, Faith interrupted. Arrangement or not. Samuel knelt beside her, gently taking the scrub brush from her hands. You're trembling. I was so scared, Faith admitted, her composure finally cracking. All I could think was not William, please not William. Samuel pulled her into his arms as she began to cry, the stress of the day finally overwhelming her. He's all right, you took care of him. I love them, Faith whispered against his chest, all of them. I didn't expect to, but I do. Samuel's arms tightened around her. They're starting to love you too, even William. They stayed that way for several minutes, Faith drawing comfort from his solid presence. When she finally pulled back, something had changed in Samuel's eyes. Faith, he said softly, the first time he'd used her given name. I think I'm starting to. A cry from upstairs interrupted him, Joseph calling out from a nightmare. Faith quickly rose. I should go to him. Samuel nodded, the moment broken. Of course. As autumn deepened into winter, the dynamics of the Erikson household continued to evolve. Faith established a proper schoolroom in the rarely used dining room, and the boys' education progressed steadily. The house transformed under her care, becoming the warm home Samuel had envisioned when he proposed their arrangement. What neither had anticipated was the growing affection between them. Samuel found reasons to be near Faith, helping with chores that never concerned him before. Faith discovered herself watching for his return each evening, her heart quickening at the sight of him crossing the yard. Yet neither spoke of these feelings, the boundaries of their agreement standing as an invisible barrier between them. The first heavy snow came in early December, blanketing the ranch in pristine white. The boys were ecstatic, begging to go sledding on the hill behind the barn. Faith bundled them up in every warm garment she could find and watched from the porch as Samuel showed them how to steer the makeshift sleds. Their laughter carried on the crisp air, and Faith felt a wave of contentment wash over her. For the first time in years, she felt she belonged somewhere, was needed by someone. Mrs. Erikson, come join us, Joseph called, waving enthusiastically. Faith hesitated, but Samuel was already trudging through the snow toward her. Come on, he encouraged, his breath visible in the cold air. Even a schoolteacher deserves some fun. Before she could protest, he'd taken her hand and was pulling her toward the hill. The touch of his gloved fingers against her sent warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with her heavy shawl. The afternoon turned into one of the happiest Faith could remember. She sledded with Joseph, helped Thomas build a snow fort, and even engaged in a snowball fight that left everyone breathless with laughter. When a particularly well-aimed throw from Faith caught Samuel square in the face, he stood stunned for a moment before charging toward her. Faith squealed and tried to run, but Samuel caught her around the waist, lifting her off her feet. "Traitor," he declared, spinning her around as she laughed helplessly. "Conspiring with my own sons against me." When he set her down, their faces were inches apart, their breathing heavy from exertion and something else neither dared name. "Pa's kissing Mrs. Erikson," George shouted, breaking the spell. "Am not," Samuel called back, reluctantly stepping away from Faith. "But I might dump snow down your shirt if you don't apologize to your mother." It was the first time Samuel had referred to Faith as the boy's mother, and the significance wasn't lost on anyone. William gave his father a long, considering look before turning to help Joseph with his snow fort. That evening, after the boys had gone to bed exhausted from their day's adventures, Faith sat by the fire mending one of Thomas's shirts. Samuel joined her, settling into the chair opposite with a book he made no pretense of reading. "You called me their mother today," Faith said finally, not looking up from her sewing. "You are their mother now," Samuel replied, "in all the ways that matter." Faith's fingers stilled. "Our arrangement was for me to care for them, not to replace. No one's replacing anyone," Samuel interrupted gently. "Catherine will always be their first mother, but you—" He hesitated. "You've brought something back to this house that's been missing since she died. Not just order and cleanliness, but heart." Faith finally met his gaze. "The 6-month mark of our agreement is approaching." Samuel's expression tightened. "Are you unhappy here?" "No," Faith answered honestly. "I'm happier than I've been in years." "Then stay," Samuel said simply. "Not because of our arrangement, but because this is your home now, because the boys need you." He took a deep breath. "Because I need you." Faith's heart thundered in her chest. "Samuel, I know this started as convenience," he continued, "but it's become something else for me, something real." He moved to kneel beside her chair. "I'm falling in love with you, Faith. I don't expect you to feel the same," but Faith silenced him by placing her fingers against his lips. "I think I've been falling in love with you since the day William got hurt and I saw the father you truly are." Samuel captured her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "I want a real marriage, Faith, if you'll have me." "What about?" Faith couldn't bring herself to say it, the old hurt still too raw. Samuel seemed to understand. "I have 4 wonderful sons. If God blesses us with more children, I'll be grateful. If not, our family is already complete." Tears spilled down Faith's cheeks as decades of shame and inadequacy began to dissolve in the face of his acceptance. That night, Faith moved her belongings into Samuel's room, and their marriage truly began. Winter passed in a newfound closeness, both between Faith and Samuel and within the family as a whole. William finally dropped his resistance, accepting Faith as his mother after she spent 3 nights nursing him through a dangerous fever, refusing to leave his side even when Samuel insisted she rest. By spring, Faith suspected a miracle was occurring. Her monthly cycle, always reliable even during her first marriage, failed to appear. She said nothing to Samuel, fearful of raising hopes that might be crushed. But as 1 month turned to 2 and then 3, she could no longer deny the changes in her body. On a warm May evening, as they sat on the porch watching the boys play in the twilight, Faith finally gathered her courage. "Samuel," she said quietly, "I need to tell you something." He turned to her, immediately concerned by her serious tone. "What is it?" "I'm going to have a baby," Faith whispered, her hand instinctively moving to her still flat stomach. "Our baby." Samuel stared at her in disbelief. "Are you certain?" Faith nodded, tears threatening. "Almost 4 months now. I wanted to be sure before I told you." With a joyous whoop that startled the boys into silence, Samuel swept Faith into his arms, spinning her around on the porch before setting her down with sudden gentleness. "Careful," he exclaimed. "Should you be up? Do you need to rest? Are you feeling well?" Faith laughed through her tears. "I'm perfectly fine. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time." "But not my wife," Samuel said softly, "not carrying my child." The boys crowded around, demanding to know what was happening. When Samuel announced they would have a new brother or sister by autumn, reactions were mixed. Joseph was ecstatic. Thomas and George peppered them with questions about where babies came from that left Samuel stammering. And William stared at Faith for a long moment before stepping forward to awkwardly pat her arm. "I'll help you carry water," he offered. "Pa says ladies in your condition shouldn't lift heavy things." It was the most tenderness he'd ever shown her, and Faith had to blink back fresh tears. That night, as Samuel held her close in their bed, his hand resting protectively over the slight swell of her belly, Faith reflected on how completely her life had transformed in less than a year. "What are you thinking about?" Samuel murmured against her hair. "How strange life's paths can be," Faith replied. "If Thomas Parker hadn't evicted me, if you hadn't needed a mother for your boys, if you hadn't been brave enough to take a chance on a stranger with 4 wild sons," Samuel added. "They're not so wild anymore," Faith smiled. "Just spirited." Samuel chuckled. "Catherine would have liked you. She always said if anything happened to her, she wanted someone kind to raise her boys." It was the first time he'd spoken so openly about his first wife, and Faith treasured the trust it represented. "I hope I'm doing right by her," Faith said softly. "You are," Samuel assured her. "More than I ever dreamed possible when I rode up to your house that day." Faith turned in his arms to face him. "I never thought I could be this happy again." After Elijah, after being told so many times I was worthless as a woman. "You are the most valuable treasure I've ever found," Samuel interrupted, his voice fierce with conviction. "Fertile or barren, it wouldn't matter. You're the heart of this family now." Faith kissed him then, pouring all her love and gratitude into the gesture. "And you're the man who saw me when everyone else looked away." On a crisp October morning, as the aspen trees blazed gold against the Colorado sky, Faith gave birth to twin girls. Samuel paced outside the bedroom door while the midwife attended his wife. The boys huddled anxiously in the kitchen below. When the first cry pierced the air, followed shortly by a second, Samuel sank to his knees in prayer. The midwife opened the door minutes later, her face wreathed in smiles. "2 daughters, Mr. Erikson, and a tired but healthy wife asking for you." Samuel entered the bedroom to find Faith propped against pillows, a tiny bundle cradled in each arm. Her face was drawn with exhaustion but radiant with joy. "Come meet your daughters," she whispered. Samuel approached almost reverently, gazing down at the 2 perfect faces. "They're beautiful," he managed, his voice choked with emotion, "just like their mother." "I thought we might name them Catherine and Alina," Faith suggested tentatively, "after your first wife and my mother." Samuel's eyes filled with tears as he carefully gathered one of his daughters into his arms. Catherine and Alina Erikson. Perfect. The boys were allowed in shortly after, their eyes wide with wonder at their tiny sisters. William, now 13 and increasingly responsible, solemnly promised to teach them to ride horses when they were old enough. Joseph insisted on touching their impossibly small fingers, marveling when one of the babies gripped his thumb. As evening fell, the midwife shooed everyone out to let Faith rest. Samuel settled the boys for the night before returning to sit beside his wife, watching over her and their newborn daughters. 6 children, he mused quietly. "When I rode onto your property last year, I never imagined this." Faith smiled sleepily. "God has a way of giving us more than we dare ask for." Samuel leaned down to kiss her forehead. "No man has ever been as blessed as I am right now." Faith's eyes drifted closed, secure in the knowledge that the family surrounding her was built on love rather than obligation. The arrangement that had begun as her salvation had transformed into the deepest joy she'd ever known. The once barren widow who had been cast aside had found her place at last as the beloved heart of the Erikson family, mother to 6 children, and cherished wife of a man who saw her true worth when everyone else had looked away.